Welcome. I think by our own admission, we do not talk about Connacht enough. So, happy to put that right today. Connacht, as I'm sure you've seen this season thus far, they're ninth in the URC table, point off top eight, and with a game in hand. And upcoming, there is Dragons away, then over Christmas, Ulster at home, Leinster in Dublin, and then 2026 more Europe, where they are at one win and one loss, as you know. And end of January, new stand at Dexcom Stadium opens against Leinster. Full house already. That's January 24th. The season is taking shape. Our rugby coverage, as ever, is with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Grassroots with the Energia AIL. They are official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, and the Irish men's and women's teams. And their Rugby for All initiative welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. If you want to learn more about Connacht's exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, then you can visit energia.ie/rugby. So, to the man in question, 7 seasons at Leinster, 18 months at Racing, and now very much at Connacht. A new face, but a familiar face. Stuart Lancaster, good to talk to you again. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
You couldn't stay away. You couldn't stay away.
No. It was pretty unique circumstances how it all unfolded. But I actually asked the other day after the game, said, "Oh, when you came for the Racing game to watch your son play against Connor, you were just doing the deal then, were you?" I was like, "No, I genuinely wasn't. Like, we generally came just to have a weekend in Galway and watch Dan play, and we ended up in a bar, and I said to my wife, geez, like we miss Ireland, don't we?" And it was probably a week later that I spoke to David Humphries, spoke to Willie Ruan, and then got interviewed.
Because I know you did a radio interview just after that Connacht
That's
game.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
you were asked, would you consider? And you're a smart man. You know people are listening, and you said, yes, I would. Did you turn your phone volume up then and put it on the table and watch and wait? Were you hopeful?
Well, I think you give me more credit than I deserve here. Like, genuinely didn't. I didn't create the interview. Like, they contacted me to chat to me, and I didn't have a clue what they were going to ask me.
Mm.
But it was a question, and like, why would I have said no? I really enjoyed my time at Leinster. Um, I was at work. I'd actually gone through a very long process for the Australian head coaching job when I left Racing. So I left Racing in February, and that was probably 3 months. And genuinely there were moments through those 3 months periods as we get interviewed where you're thinking, actually, this could happen. I could end up working alongside Joe. I could end up working alongside Les Kiss. I could end up potentially coaching in Australia. And so we were living in Leeds. Obviously, we'd moved back from France. But that then had changed course. They decided to go with Les Kiss, so that wasn't going to happen. And yeah, I was looking forward to getting a job again. And obviously, right place, right time. It happened to be Connacht.
You're 56 years old now. Pretty much the fittest 56-year-old around, by the way, I hasten to add. But I saw you say to the Sunday Times over the summer, it's just this stage of life, I suppose. You said, I've got a lot of friends who are winding down, semi retired, thinking about doing other things. What I don't want to do is keep trying to get to the very top of Everest all the time and then get to 70 years old and realize, Jesus Christ, I've missed my life. That balancing in life, it's been on my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true, and it still is. It still is. I woke up this morning, flicked on the TV, and thought England are playing the Ashes in Adelaide, and I've always said to my wife, "Geez, we should go and do an Ashes tour, shouldn't we?" And I said to her on the phone this morning, I was driving to work. I said, it could be in Adelaide, and I would love to do all those things, but there's still an itch to scratch in coaching, in leadership, and in making a difference to teams and to people. I really enjoy it, genuinely enjoy it. So it doesn't feel like work. I know it's a cliche, but it definitely doesn't feel like work to me to come every day and work with 19 to 35-year-olds and try and help them improve and grow as people. And I genuinely love it. I genuinely love coaching, and being in the west of Ireland is very, very similar to living in Cumbria. So Cumbria, the Lake District and where I'm from is very, very similar to, having been out to Connemara a few times now, it's very, very similar. We love living here. And So I'll shelve the ashes, the ashes for a few more years, and yeah, keep going because I still feel there's a lot more in me.
Well, these are very interesting questions as well to weigh up. You know, what am I doing with my time? What am I doing with my life? Because there's no doubt an Ashes tour and the other 15 things on the bucket list on paper, they are very exciting things to do. And you feel like they're great memories to have and they round out a life a little bit. But equally, the most important thing in life, I think, is what you're doing day to day to day to day. It's no point if you have a great holiday for 2 weeks of the year and the other 50 weeks of the year you're miserable in your work. Ultimately what you're doing every day, I think, is what makes up a good life. And you always seem very, very happy. As you said, working with people, that buzz that you get from helping a young person improve a little bit and watching that happen. So
Yeah.
I think you'll be doing this till you're 70.
Yeah, you're probably right. Hopefully my wife isn't listening, but I think she knows. She knows. She's the same, to be fair. I mean, like she does online fitness classes, and she's got a whole group of women that follow her, and she makes a difference to them in the same way. So we're both wired the same way. Our kids are 24 and 25 now, so they've sort of flown the nest. But we still obviously want to spend time with them because when you rewind the clock, it was the kids were 7 and 8 when I left Leeds to go to England in the academies role, and obviously then did the national team when they were 11 and 12. So there's definitely that as well, though, that family piece that you need to get right in your life. My mum's 82, she's on the farm on her own in Cumbria. I've not been able to get back. So
Mm.
I don't want to be so devoted to work that I do miss family, friends, moments and occasions with them. And I'm conscious of the ticking of the clock. 56 becomes 60, becomes 65, and I'm fortunate that in decent shape, but that's not to say things don't change as you get into your 60s and into your 70s. So very mindful of that, but no, at the moment I feel like the balance is really good.
Mm.
The job in France was I knew it was going to be hard, but it was really hard. And my wife said to me towards the end, "Are you enjoying it?" I went, "That's not a word I would use
Mm.
at all."
Mm.
Um, so in some ways, I feel a lot better now than I did when I was at Racing, even though the challenges are the same. You're trying to build a team that's maybe been not been that successful, or you're trying to get them into the top six or the top eight or into Champions Cup and do well. So it's a similar dynamic, but it feels a lot different in Connacht.
Yeah. It's funny. I still think you was 45. It's funny you're talking there about knocking on 60.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And we get married. Our wedding anniversary is coming up of 30 years. And again, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm still the same age as when I got married. And I think part of the reason is as well because I work with young people um, all the time. It keeps you like-minded. So you're working genuinely. Yeah, even the staff wise, most of them are like your Cully Tuckers, your John Muldoons, they're all, 40s, early 40s. So no, it's great. I mean, I've absolutely no complaints about, where we've landed and how much we're enjoying it.
And are you living in Galway City or a bit
Yeah,
further?
we're just in
Yeah.
Knocknacarra, just past Salt Hill.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got the two dogs. So we've got the ferry over with the two dogs. So the two dogs are settled, and Nina loves, walking on the prom. I've done my sea swimming. I've started my sea swimming and my Silver Strand sauna. It's cold. I've come to the conclusion, but good for the soul.
Yeah, I bet it is. Um, so we'll get to Connacht. Let's go there via Racing because I'd like to see how you pitch up in Connacht, what you take from that experience. I mean, it's only 16, 18 months in Racing after you left Leinster, of course. Um, I saw you say that when you were leaving Leinster, you said to the players that I've kind of jotted down 184 lessons or maxims or just things I've taken from my time here. You said of Paris, I could probably write 284. So first season, sixth in the top 14, knocked out of the Champions Cup by Toulouse, and then midway through the second season, Racing were in 12th and had not made the Champions Cup knockouts. I was pretty burnt, to be honest. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do next, other than leaving France. Why did this go so badly?
Um, yeah, well, it is a long story, but so essentially, I was brought in. Leinster had played Racing in the year before, the year I'd signed for Racing, and beaten Racing by a combination, I think, 40 odd points in Le Havre, and then another 38 points or whatever in at the Aviva. So it was an 80-point differential. And I think the owner at the time thought that, obviously bringing someone in, we'd played against them in the Champions Cup, would be um, the right time to try and create a turnaround. So obviously, in my mind, I'm on a turnaround job. And when you arrive, you look at the squad you've inherited, what sort of contracts they're on, what the length of the contract is, and you quickly realise that actually there's not a huge amount of work I can do to change this dynamic very, very quickly. So you get on with what you've got. You get on with what you've got. And the first year actually, we were top of the table at Christmas. So this time, my first year, we were top of the table. And it was definitely a big change in the way in which I coached the team. I announced the team earlier in the week, and changed the way we trained, very similar to what we would have done at Leinster. And we definitely had a spike. There was a period post Christmas where we lost Nolan Lagarre, Gail Fico, etc. Some of the key French players to the national team, and that Six Nations period. When you're dealing with 26 league games, it's a lot more than 18 league games, you know what I mean? And you're playing a lot during those windows. So we lost 5 games on the row. So we went from, and the top 14 is so competitive because of the pressure of relegation. And if 14th gets relegated and 13 has to go in this horrible playoff against the Pro D2 team, the gap between, I don't know, second and 14th can often be less than 10 points. So if you end up in a situation whereby you lose 3 or 4 on the row, you can easily slip down very quickly. So that's what happened. We ended up sort of like sixth, seventh, battling to try and get into the playoffs, which was probably about par really for where the squad was at the time. We did qualify for the Champions Cup. We only won one pool game, and the irony was in the second year we won 2 pool games, but then didn't qualify.
Right.
So the vagaries of the Champions Cup we could discuss as well, but. And that was a challenge. But it's not like Racing the previous year hadn't qualified and got beaten by 50 points by Lions in the Challenge Cup.
Okay.
So it wasn't a team that was performing at the highest level that I inherited. But I love the challenge. The players were great. The challenge obviously is of trying to communicate in English, but then translate it into French. And obviously just a lot of the differences in the physical, technical, tactical, and mental characteristics of some of the players I was coaching. They just weren't at the same level as clearly Leinster were, because Leinster were, there or thereabouts in the Champions Cup final most years, and Racing weren't.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge to try and improve things, with a French coaching team and everything else. So first year finished, and I was like, geez, that was a challenge. Sia Khaleesi left to go back to South Africa, but Owen Farrell was signed. And the second year, because of like the Olympics, we didn't play our first few games at Paris La Défense Arena. We were in a place called Créteil. Again, you win a game, you lose a game, so you set off not on the front foot. We were sort of mid-table. Again, win a game, lose a game. So a lack of consistency, and I could feel the sort of, is this working? Around me. The previous head coach, Laurent Travers, who coached the team for the previous 8 years, became my president, became my boss, essentially. And that's a challenge in any organization.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I'm being polite. I'm being polite. It's a challenge.
And you've a big character as an owner as well. I mean, he's not afraid to
Yeah, big
call out
crowd.
Sia Khaleesi and others.
Yeah, and I'm looking around thinking, well, I've got what I've got. I'm trying to change the team. I'm looking at the academy thinking, we've got some good young players, but it's not the same caliber as what I was coaching at Leinster, and I'm trying to upskill these lads who've come through the French system. Anyway, Christmas came and went, and there was a decision made that Lauren Travers was going to leave. And Jackie said Stuart's, completely in charge now. And then we beat the Stormers, but we didn't qualify, even though we won two out of four. And I sense a real shift at that point. The following week we played Cast at home. The owner came in at half time, and I remember thinking to myself, this is not going in the right direction at all. He obviously clearly doesn't believe in it, and I'm beginning to lose confidence in the whole thing from my.
He came into the dressing room at halftime.
Yeah, yeah, and it's reasonably. I wouldn't say it happens in every French club, but it certainly happened at Racing a few times. So
Get
anyway,
out! Get out! This is my
anyway,
dressing room. If
anyway.
Willie Ruan stuck his head in your dressing room, you'd tell him where to go. Um,
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
different world, but anyway, so that sort of wins and losses meant that we were 12th, but in another win we could have been sixth
I
again. You know what I mean?
understand. Yeah. But the vibes weren't good, and you sensed a loss.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then we went away actually a week off, and I said to my wife, I think I'm going to get sacked this week, and it was the Monday of our first week off. Got to about 10 o'clock, I was like, well, maybe not. And then at 10:30, a phone call came from a French agent saying they want you to leave. So I never spoke to anyone again. Basically, came back from that holiday, packed my belongings into a box, and came home.
So sorry, a French agent told you, not the owner.
Yeah, yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
come on.
So yeah,
Sorry, does that not leave a? Is that's poor? That's poor.
yeah. I mean, there's a few things really, but that it's business in France, and they do it a certain way. So it wasn't for me to complain, or I just needed to look after my family. That was the main thing.
Sure.
We'd committed, Nina had moved. The kids had obviously were invested. Dan was there.
Yeah.
Dan was there. And so it was tough. But the pleasing thing was that when I left, Dan still got picked by Patrice Galazzo, and Dan proved, his commitment to the club and proved his quality. They didn't keep him on, but obviously he's now gone and got a career up in Glasgow.
Yeah.
My mum's Scottish qualified. He played against Toulouse at the weekend, and so it's worked out well for him. But it's tough. It's tough on your family. It's
Yeah,
tough.
because the playing of Dan, the signing of Dan, that was one of the great sticks to beat you with routinely.
Yeah, yeah, that, and obviously, yeah. Well, anything really. And if you didn't pick, certain players, or there was injuries that obviously, you know, were questioned. So yeah. But anyway, listen, it was. I don't regret the choice to do it, and I don't regret the experience I had.
Yeah,
I regret the outcome, and I still got a lot of affection for the people and the place.
yeah,
Um, but it was obviously time to move on, and then without too much gap, the Australia sort of thing began to
sure.
build momentum, and then obviously that disappeared. There was sort of the Wales, a couple of conversations about Wales director rugby job, or would I be interested in this, that, and the other. But then Connacht rang, and it seemed to fall into place nicely.
Yeah, it sure did. Well, I want to talk about Connacht. Very last one on Racing. Um, because people from afar would have seen Owen Farrell and Khaleesi and Tuisova and Henry Arundel and the likes of Fiku and Legaric already there. Um, I've seen a few dispatches where just the culture's not right. There's a kind of comfort in the environment. There's not an absolute raging desire to get better every day, and you try to just shock the dressing room into that by all sorts of interesting tactics, i.e. getting them to rate each other and telling people, well, you might think your teammates think you're in the top third or quarter of teammates they admire. You're actually in the bottom quarter, so come on. You tried all these different things just to get a burning desire in that dressing room, and that proved difficult. And this is often kind of talked about with French dressing rooms. There's a kind of a, hey, we're away from home. Ah, yeah, it's fine if we lose. That kind of a thing. So you couldn't get that place culturally, that dressing room where you wanted it to be. It seemed.
I think a cultural turnaround, like it's 18 months is like very, very hard to turn something around in terms of timeline, I think.
Right.
If you look at soccer in England, how hard it is in a really competitive league, and top 14 is as close to English soccer as you're gonna get.
Mm,
And it's hard, and particularly if you've got high expectations, and you've got a squad that's sort of contracted, and you can't. There's no, like, if you were to release a player or pay them off, it still counts in the cap in France, so you can't just like say, well, I can see this guy's clearly not good enough. I didn't sign him, but now I'm stuck with him. I'll pay him off. You can't. So it takes time to get the squad you want. But I look at the Racing squad now, and I know, and I think that's getting where it should be.
yeah,
And the young players are starting to come through. And Patrice Colazo, should have inherited from me a decent opportunity to build, and he's got his own way of doing things, which is fine. So yeah, I think it takes time. It takes longer than 18 months, if
fair
you
enough.
want my answer. But do I think it could have worked? I do, but it was unbelievably hard to do, and I probably couldn't have worked any harder than I did, and I threw every tool in the book
Yeah,
that I'd learned from all my career. Um, and at the same time, still trying to learn and master the language, which I was getting better at. But again, 18 months was never enough to go from, O-level French to fluent French. So that didn't help,
mm,
clearly. But it wouldn't put me off going to work in France again, but probably as a number two, not as a number one.
interesting, interesting. And so then the coach who pitches up a Connacht, I don't sense. I mean, not that you're saying, "Hey, I'm blameless. I did everything perfectly," but I don't sense your confidence in yourself was necessarily damaged as you arrived into Connacht. That you seem like you're at a point where, with your experience and you can kind of look at that and say, "Look, it was a strange world. I don't necessarily feel like it was about me."
I felt, as I said, when I felt burnt out was probably the right,
Okay,
the best way to describe it is that the scars start to build as you get older in your career. When you're young, you just like can brush them off. You coach England at 41, you just like, oh, I'm sure I can do this interim job okay, and it goes okay. You win 4 out of 5, and but then, when you lost your England job, and then lost the Racing job, you start to think, gee, this has got like, scars are building here. But on the flip side, when I left England, I didn't go into Leinster with any sense of lack of confidence in the direction I was going and
okay,
what I understood to be good, in terms of like player development, developmental toughness, developing technical and tactical skills, to develop game understanding, to develop leaders, to create training sessions that would, inspire and motivate and develop young talent as well as existing and senior talent, which was at Leinster. So when I came to Leinster, because I'd had that period of like self-reflection, dealt with the England thing as best I could.
mm,
It wasn't dealt with, but it was best I could. Um, and then I'd done my research, albeit it was only a week from Leo ringing me to Leo arriving. I thought, I think I can improve this team, and I think I know how. And that was my opening line, like, because they'd just lost against Connacht in the Pro 12 final and was struggling a little bit at the start of the pre-season. So, right, let's get the defence sorted. Confident I could build that, and then things evolved from there. And I felt very, very similar going into again, the window between agreeing to join Connacht and pre-season was very small. But when I watched them play the previous year, and I looked, obviously they came 13th, but I thought there's a lot of good foundations here. There's a few things I think I can tweak. Obviously, you go into a new organization, you ask good questions. What was training like? What was the environment like? What were we like on defeat? What were we like on victory? Who are the key players? What's Bundy like? What's Mark Hansen like? Tell me about, last year, whatever. So asking good questions and then formulating a plan in my mind about how to attack pre-season. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm 56, as we've said, and I've coached now, I guess, in the professional game since I was 30. That's 26 years of experience plus another 10 years of teaching experience. So
yeah.
yeah, I felt confident I could help improve Connacht.
Okay. And when you said scar tissue does build up, how does that manifest itself on a bad day? Lose faith in your own decisions at times, or
No, no, no,
no?
no, no, it's not that. No, no, you don't lose faith in your decisions, but you just sometimes the game of rugby is not always decided by it can be decided by the bounce of the ball, or a red card here or a referee decision or a TMO intervention or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And um, sometimes, obviously, you lose and it's your fault, and well, not your fault. The team have underperformed and the other teams played better. But you tend to carry the weight of defeat a bit heavier, I think,
Yeah.
with more scars. But you also do develop a thicker skin as well, if that makes sense. It's a bit of a contradiction, but
Mm.
you do I do sometimes get frustrated with, like, say the Ospreys game 21-0 up and we lose 24-21. I'm like, so frustrated that we found a way to lose from a winning position. So, but what I do enjoy about the process is, even though the pain of defeat still stings, going from what's the problem to what's the solution, and what is it we need to do to be more consistent mentally and throughout the course of a game, so we win a game away from home with that ruthless mentality that would have existed in the England team when it were at best, or the Leinster team when it was at its best.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's just, yeah, sometimes, yeah, you can just get a little bit worn down by it, but not to a point that I'd quit it.
Yes. Good. Um, so I mentioned at the top, Connacht are ninth in the URC table, 1 point off top eight, and with the game in hand, and upcoming Dragons away, then Ulster home, Leinster in Dublin. Then it's New Year. Then Europe swings back around. I mentioned the new stand at Dexcom Stadium, which will open against Leinster in a full house. So it's a really kind of engaging month, I suppose, coming up for everybody. I think it was in Johnny Sexton's book. Whenever you pitched up at Leinster anyway in your first kind of meeting with the team, you may have said either fourth star in the jersey or we want 5 stars in the jersey. Whichever it was, either way, Sexton in his book said he kind of caught Easton say was I and sort of said, yes, this is kind of, now we're talking. This is where we are. What did you say to the Connacht team who finished 13th last year? What was that opening message about what this season and beyond could and should have in store?
I think it was about understanding that we've not come here to come 13th. Um, it's not we're not in this room now to come 13th. Looking at the talent in the room, looking at what we have in place now, Connacht need to understand, we as a group of players and coaches who represent Connacht Rugby, we need to understand we're not here to come 13th. And in order to achieve what we need to achieve, we need to take a big step in terms of our training habits, our mindset, our defensive understanding of what we're trying to achieve, and nailing big moments in games and coming out on top. Because, this sort of notion of Connacht being the fourth province,
Yeah.
um, I think has gone or should be gone when that stand opens. I mean, in Connacht's defense, the players' defense, like, it's been like playing in COVID, for a long time. In that, with that stand being empty, and obviously the crowd are, I mean, incredible. They are such a loyal support group when they stand in the rain, and I felt so sorry for them. Like the other day, we were playing Black Lion, but I'm thinking to myself, just one more month, just hang in there. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a game changer. It's a game changer. And I'm sat in a high performance building here, which used to be porta cabins for the players. The Greyhound track, with basically, you speak to Eric Elwood or to Jack Carty when he started watching Connacht and playing, to see that stand and what it'll create in terms of performance impact for the playing group, obviously with supporters to get behind them, but also the commercial impact of Monday to Friday conferencing. There's no thing in the west of Ireland. The match day experience, the corporate. So the income that should be generated through the new stand, and the energy it'll bring will be huge for the organisation over the long term, for sure. And I think, in England, like, three Premiership clubs went bust after COVID, and Connacht have somehow, and it's incredible how they've done it, managed to get through that period and build a high performance centre and a new stand, and it's remarkable, really, to see it now. The Astro pitch makes a huge difference, for the quality of rugby and the quality of training. So there's a huge amount to be excited about for the second half of the year, but we're in this period now where it's not open,
Yeah.
and we need to win away from home in Dragons, which is tricky. We've then got to navigate the Christmas period. I've got to try and get home for a day, if humanly possible. Well, I am getting home for a day to Leeds, and then I'll come back St Stephen's Day, and then we play Ulster the day after. So that's a huge game, but stand won't be open. And then New Year comes and goes, and then all roads lead to the Aviva. The first time I'll have seen and spoken to a lot of the players I've coached for 7 years. So that'll be a huge game for us. And then yeah, we've got the two European games, and then irony of ironies, it's Leinster against Connacht the next come when it opens.
Yeah. It's a
So
fun month though. I mean, that is really great. Um, you mentioned defence there, and I suppose like the short version on Connacht over the last year and probably 2 years really is like the attack has been good in many ways, and you'd say kind of that DNA change that Pat Lam oversaw. Like the Connacht have been an attacking team really for the guts of a decade now. The days of like, oh no, we like the wind and the rain and it's a leveler and we're the underdog. There, that is ancient history. And yet, ironically, defence has let the team down. So, in so much as you can, because I can't open your tactics book, your assessment of what was wrong with the defence and primarily what you're doing to try and turn it around.
I'd say there's probably a couple of things. One is to get the player's mindset to have the balance between attack and defense. So where you shine a light the most, or where a player's focus will go. So if you're shining a light on attack or the kicking game or transition or the set piece and the ruck, and defense is like fifth in line, then inevitably that's what will happen. So I've just tried to redress the balance there, to make sure it's 50-50. And I think that's definitely landed. There's no doubt about that. Um, the balance between playing the running game and the pressure game, it's important in rugby. You can't ignore the way the game is going. Organized defenses mean if you overplay in your own half, there's a good chance you're going to get turned over, or something's going to happen. There'll be a ruck or whatever, and you'll give them access, and then they'll have a maul, and then you'll concede, and there'll be a repeated cycle. So understanding how to manage the running game and balance that with the pressure game, I think is has been a
Okay.
key uh, lesson I've been trying with the coaching team to sell to the players and understand. So yeah, and just build on that sort of like resilience mindset and the identity of the West of Ireland. The West of Ireland, it's a tough place, isn't it? And you do want to make sure that when people do come, you do have that, resilience and that unity and that belief that typifies people from the West.
Yeah.
So we had a great, like, we went away to Westport and had a great talk by one of the former players. Sorry, one of the former players who talked about the history of of Connacht and the West of Ireland, back through the centuries. And so you can then build. You've got a strong identity to build from, I think. So that can weave into your defensive mindset and everything. So there's all sorts of little things, but yeah, you're right. That's the perception that you've just given over the last couple of years is the reality, and that's the bit I'm trying to just get the balance right.
Have you, you've three British and Irish lions in your squad. You've several more who toured with Ireland over the summer, and then you've got the quite a young batch coming through. So, for instance, these one, two, three, four, five, guts of 10 games so far. Have you played your best 15 once?
Um, I'm still figuring out what that best 15 is. When you're new to an organization, you can learn a lot from your pre-season and how you train. And obviously, from my Leinster days, training is always competitive. Stews days are still stew days, and there's a lot of growth going on in terms of the young players. So I do think the young players are accelerating quicker than I would have thought, and I think they're very good.
Okay.
So, I'm not depressed about the quality of players we have in the academy. I'm entirely opposite. I'm excited about that. And so I'm still figuring out, obviously through games, through dealing with pressure moments, where we sit. But obviously you have to ride in selection with injury and international. I mean, Bundy, for example, was on the lines. You say came back late, had one game, went away, played November, comes back, has to be rested. Max now got a foot injury that's going to take him out for the foreseeable. So we've not had everyone available. I'm getting closer to understanding what it is, but equally, the challenge is to win in the here and now, learn about your team, build for the future, and get us to a point where we're in the top eight come the end of the season. So we're in the shot of it. We're in with a shot,
Yeah.
and get ourselves back into the Champions Cup. So we want to be in with the shot, and I would think by, if I say the progression that we're making now, no team's going to go unbeaten anyway between now and April, including us. So, but I can see an upward trend in everything that we're doing. I think the stand opening, um, the building of the squad and how we train and those habits getting ingrained puts us in a position where if we can get into that top eight by May, June time, I think most teams will be thinking this is going to be a difficult game if we're playing Connacht,
Okay.
either home or away. And then you
Go
two
from
games
there.
away from a final.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you say training habits, mentioned that once or twice in this conversation. What's a training habit or two that for you is I guess an obvious thing could be honesty of effort and all these kind of things. But when you say training habits, what kind of things are you talking about there specifically?
I mean, understanding that training is going to be fast paced, it's going to have intensity. There's going to be little room for discussion or debate. That core skills will be tested under pressure.
Yeah.
That we will create as many game related scenarios as I can sandwich into 40 minutes as humanly possible. So, if you looked at yesterday's session, for example, we went from like a primer. Ingraining sort of core skills straight into three teams of 14, which we did for a good 25, 30 minutes. And I would say every player was under pressure through the different constraints that we created within the games to make decisions, attack or defense, and execute under pressure, which obviously then gets reviewed, analyzed, fed back, tomorrow. We had so there's that, and obviously that leads into 15 on 15 and the cohesion for the starting team versus
Mm.
the guys who are not playing and how we create that. So, and also not wasting, we don't waste a minute, or I don't waste a minute, and I don't waste Mondays either. I think Mondays are often like an install day, you'd call it in rugby, whereas I see it as a coaching day. So I think we don't waste a minute. And also, we spend a lot of time talking about leadership development, how the players interact with each other during the tough training session. Do the heads go down after a mistake, which is often the case, when I first arrived? Um, how do our leaders interact when the pressure moments come on? I put it on LinkedIn actually, we had a guy, Scott Selwood came in for 2 days from Collingwood. Um, and he talked about, there'd be a champion Aussie rules team. And he talked about some of the strategies that they used, which was absolutely brilliant, because he layered on the back of what I was saying to the players, evidence from a team that's been ultimately successful. You know what I mean? So that idea of developing leadership and confidence and assertiveness and positive body language are all interrelated to training.
Yeah.
And that's how you build the habits which then stick in games. I mean, I firmly believe that, you know, what's the phrase? You don't rise or fall to the level of the game, you rise or fall to the level of your training.
Correct. Yeah. Um, that whole dealing with mistakes thing is it's very interesting, and it's very universal as well. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll do interviews here and I'll trip over my question, make a mess of it, and it's very important that I'm not going, God, I made a mess of that question as you're trying to answer the really rubbish question I asked. So dealing with that stuff in real time and not letting it compound and not making another mistake. So what's the kind of I know it's hard to distill these things down, but what's, for instance, a go-to message? Mistake happens.
Um, well, understand how you respond to it, and then have a strategy for yourself to deal with it. What is it you need to do to shake off that mistake and to reset your body language, reset your mindset, and then move on to the next moment. So, there's lots of different strategies. Some rugby players would slap their thigh, some would, um, have a little trigger that would do that. Some might just be, it might be more thinking about how I'm standing and how I'm, my posture and my body language is. I'm talking about in the context now, not of you asking me a question, thinking about the mistake. I'm talking about in the context of overthrown a line out, I've missed a conversion,
Yeah.
I've missed a tackle, and it's also then, so you've got to sort yourself out first, and then others, then how you interact with other people around you becomes the second part of it, and also what others do to you to help you,
Yes.
and it's not as it's as simple as just pulling them around, giving them a tap and saying, right, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
But you can't do it until you've learned about how you respond to mistakes. But it's actually um, you think you've let the team down, and so you go into this sort of like negative spiral, and then uh, you're actually being selfish by staying in that negative spiral for the team. So it's getting the players to understand that. Listen, boys, I understand you've made a mistake, and I know you're feeling bad about it. I said, but it's not actually helping the team by staying in this moment. We need to get out of this moment and get on to the next moment
Yeah.
because we can still win this game.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of moments in the game of dead time in rugby, in particular, I think, and how you use the moments in between the events is actually more important than actually the events themselves. Um, and so I've started talking a lot more about that because what's become obvious to me is that when you're coaching a team, Racing with the same, and Connacht maybe to a certain extent, the deja vu moment. We've been here before. We know how this plays out. There's inevitably who're going to lose this game, And what happened at Leinster was um, I came in on a period whereby they weren't as successful as they had been and what they were in the future. But when I started bringing up these things, both technically and tactically, okay, we need to improve defensively, we need to improve our attack, we need to improve this, that, and the other. I then had Sean O'Brien, Jamie Heasley, Rob Carney, Johnny Sexton, Easton Asiwa, about 7 or 8 or 9, 10 leaders I can think off the top of my head who suddenly said, right, boom, right, we're right behind him, we're right behind Leo, and we'll drive this ourselves. Do you know what I mean? So and Rod Seeb and Cully and John Muldoon, we can all use our experience as coaches, but we need Keane Prendergast, Cahill Ford, Hugh Gavin, um, Byron Ralston, you know, Kellen Blade, Jack Cat, everyone within the group. And what I'm trying to say to the players is, listen, whether you're 35 years old and you're Dave Heffernan or you're Sean Walsh at 19-year-old, if you're on the same field at the same time, there is no ABC of importance now. So Sean Walsh, your point of view and how you interact with your teammates and what you do in the team is equally important as so we have a there's a it's particularly in Ireland, I've noticed it, like a hierarchy, a respectful hierarchy that exists, and I'm trying to get rid of that.
Right.
And it's not by design. It's not like the senior players like want to be, but I remember I did a podcast, I don't know, 2018, 2019, I'd say, and I was talking about Caelan Doris, who was the under-20 captain at the time, and I said when Caelan Doris steps across the white line, he's in the starting 15. We want him to be like Caelan Doris, the under-20 captain, not quiet, respectful Caelan Doris who won't say anything. And to see the growth in Kalen, Josh, Gary, all the guys, Hugo, all those guys who were timid, quiet, introverted, um, intimidated to a certain extent going into a training session with senior players at Leinster, become the great leaders they become. It is so rewarding. And I
Yeah.
feel the same buzz about Connacht.
Okay. I,
Um,
that's fascinating. I've two last questions. Um, where are you on players? Because yes, Rob Carney would sometimes say it to me. He said sometimes old school is the best school. Where
yeah.
where are you on players holding each other to account? I.e., when that mistake happens or somebody's not up off the ground, and it's not a come on up you get, do your best. It's more of a in hell.
Yeah.
Where are you on that kind of old school holding each other to account, Roy Keane style? Is that gone from the game, or do you see a valuable place for it?
100% a valuable place for it.
Okay.
100%. You know, Psychological safety and all that is hugely important, and you can't be going around as a coach, making people in your organization feel, disrespected or not valued or um, belittled or embarrassed. Um, And I would never do that, and I would never allow one of my players ever to do that. But equally, we have to hold each other to account. There's something called the feedback loop. Like if a mistake happens and we don't discuss the mistake, even if it's a split second, and say, okay, sorry, that was my bad. I shouldn't have got beat my inside shoulder. Okay, we're on to the next thing. Then if we don't have that feedback loop and we don't hold each other to account to the standards that we set for ourselves, then we're never going to win.
And it can be done in a sharp,
Yeah, yeah, and
pointed way.
and again, I come back to the biggest. I've been very lucky to work with amazing players. Owen Farrell, Gail Fiku, Sia Khaleesi, Johnny Sexton, Easton. It's amazing the group I've worked with, and those guys at the very, very best, they're the ones who hold themselves to the highest levels of account, but each other as well. And but they never do it in a way that's disrespectful. They do it in a tough way,
Yeah.
but only because they want the team to be successful. You know what I mean? And once we get over that hurdle of understanding that it's not a personal attack, actually, it's just to help the team get better, then you're onto something. And I do feel a lot of the the things I talk about in meetings are obviously there's technical and tactical. There's right, we could run this play or do this or whatever. But there's probably and the assistant coaches would be brilliant at that as well. But I would spend a lot of time just on the bigger picture about how we create a world-class high-performing team, and the players' level of ownership within that, and how, as players, they can lead and drive that. And at its very best at Leinster, um, it was completely player-owned, and it was an amazing environment to be in.
Hmm.
And it can be done, and it can be done. I found it very hard in France, and I felt I might have got there in the end if I'd stayed the 4 years. I think hopefully I would have done, but I probably would have like been
Yeah.
there'd be nothing left in me, to
Be your
keep going.
be your last
So
job. Yeah. No, I
yeah,
understand.
exactly. Yeah.
Last topic then, and I think people are very keen to hear your thoughts on this. There is much discussion at the moment about the trends in the game. And we could spend a long time on this, and you've already been good with your time, but just some top level stuff. Obviously, tackle height and the tackle, and is it a yellow card? Is it a red card? Does anyone know what a card is anymore? That's one aspect. But also, I suppose the glaring change in the game, from my perspective as just a viewer, is it would seem it's a little bit harder to recycle the ball, keep the ball at ruck, and obviously the escort laws have changed, and so we are just seeing an abundance of kicking now. I don't class Connacht as a one of the more kickier teams. Maybe you're kicking more than I realise, but I suppose a complaint would be, uh, unintended or not, that the game now has massively incentivized kicking. That is becoming the prevalent attacking tactic, and invariably that means more knock-ons, that means more scrums, that means beefier teams coming out on top. So talk to us about the trends in the game. Where is the game in 25, Stuart?
Um, I should send on to you a presentation. I've got the recording of it that I did to World Rugby referees in 2021 to 2021. And I had all the top referees, and everyone was on there, Jules, you, etc., etc. And I said, if you're not careful, you're going to create it's not the referees, but unless we referee this area well, we're going to create a game where, as a coach, you're thinking it's actually better not to have the ball. It's better not to have the ball because multi-phase rugby is so hard to achieve. And at the time, my particular reference point was the breakdown, and I was saying, if we don't referee tackler out the way, and assist tackler must show clear release, then what happens is, as an attack coach, you start thinking, well, every time we get to three, four, five phases, someone either illegally steals the ball, and it's a penalty, and then you end up kicked back in your own half, and then you end up having to defend them all, and da da da. So I said, unless you're not careful, you're going to end up just rewarding the power-based teams, and any other team that doesn't have genetically, equipped team to compete will never be able to win. And we need to get to a point where we have over 100 rucks in a game, that we have ball in play at 35, 40 minutes. Because otherwise, if the game becomes a 32-minute ball in play game with multiple stoppages, 7-1 splits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're watching a game of American football, where it's stop start, it's a 2 hour for a game when the bowling plays 30 minutes. And so that was the presentation I gave at the time. And I remember a lot of the referees, particularly some of the English ones, Wayne Barnes, I remember speaking to him about it. There was a real shift in the Premiership, and that led into the URC, and there was a real improvement, I thought, in how that ruck area was refereed. And you can see them now trying to hurry up the dead time and et cetera, et cetera. So I do things have been stepped forward. But the unintended consequence of the kicking game and the escorting has definitely made it more. It's a tactic you can use to try and win the ball back, more than keep the ball through multi-phase. And that's more, you're talking Aussie rules, aren't you? Get the ball, kick it up into 50-50. I do think it will hit the middle ground. I do think there was a bit of a trend. But I do think, as teams get smarter about how you position your support players around that two-man contest. So, if he taps it back, why I can be stood and you tap it into my hands, I'll just run off with it the opposite way. So I do think that will change a bit. There was a bit of a trend, but I don't see it as much over the last few weeks. We saw a lot in November, I thought. But yeah, we've just got to make sure the game is designed so that that it's not just the power-based teams that are going to win. And substitutions, I would say, have a part to play in that. I mean, one of the things about the top 14, it was a rolling sub scenario. So it was like you play your tight head for 30 minutes, then the next tight head would come on for 30 minutes, and you might have a key scrum at the end of the game. You bring your first tight head back on, and you bring your Roman Talfalfino on to stop a maul. And that is special teams. That's American football.
Yeah.
And so you've got one competition where a lot of the world's best players are going to that are playing a completely different set of rules to every other competition for a start. That's making any sense to me. So, and then the head high, and if you're playing a multi-phase game, at every breakdown there's probably an infringement, and there's probably potentially every 5-10 rucks some form of shot that ends up in a shoulder to head or just below chest, or let's have a chat about this. So it's a really difficult place, I think, to referee, and I'm definitely not criticizing referees. What I would say to World Rugby is keep doubling down on refereeing the breakdown really well, and that will free up space in the game. The 50-22 has been very good, I think. It's taken two out the front line to defend. So I think there are innovations we can bring in that will help that, but they need to be carefully thought through. So I'm sort of okay with it, but I do worry that I look at the power like South Africa have, for example, and can a team that don't have as big a genetic profile or as many players available, like Ireland, even New Zealand, you put in that category, Wales, Scotland, can they compete? And we want to make sure they can, because otherwise there's only a couple of teams that are ever going to win.
Very interesting. So good with your time. Continued success this season. Big month coming up for Connacht. I'm sure the 24th of January is circled in a lot of people's calendars, yours included. We might catch you up at the end of the season, Stuart, if you have the time. But in the meantime, have a great finish to the season. Thanks so much.
Cheers. Thanks, Joe.